makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
India is currently the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic, with over 320,000 new cases per day on average and over 2,000 deaths per day, with no signs of the infection curve or the death curve falling anytime soon. And what better opportunity to show the self-righteousness and racism of the Western media than the way that they're covering India's ongoing tragedy, with displays of human suffering that they did not show when they were covering the pandemic in Britain at any of its two big peaks in April and December or January. So I'm going to show you a video of the BBC's coverage of what's going on in India right now. This is a very grim video, a very shocking video. I think if you've had loved ones or relatives who have died of coronavirus, this video will definitely get to you. So I'm just giving this warning, but I need to show it to just see the different standards in coverage that you'll see when reporting about the tragedy in India versus how the BBC reported the tragedy in Britain and even before this in Italy. So here's the video.
Story here, and India is being ravaged by a second wave of COVID-19, which is accelerating faster than anywhere else in the world. In the last 24 hours alone, more than 2,000 people have died and nearly 300,000 new cases have been reported. The true figure is also thought to be much higher. Many parts of the country are reporting hospitals being overwhelmed, oxygen shortages and people dying without getting treatment. From Delhi, Yogita Lamai reports with cameramen Fred Scott and Sanjay Ganguly, and a warning: this report contains distressing scenes right from the start.
A capital on its knees. At its biggest hospitals, people being pushed to the limit of human endurance. My husband's in a very bad state. Let me get through, this woman says. She's been carrying him around for 10 hours.
Now, the first thing that you'll notice here is that there is no blurring of the faces of the people at all in this video. And we'll see that they do this with hospital patients in their coverage of Britain and Italy. So that's the first thing. No dignity at all of the people who are being shown.
Many of these people won't survive the night. Sir, for 1 minute, come and look at my mother, a man pleads. A doctor follows him to the ambulance and prepares to say the words he's had to say over and over again in the past day alone. She's no more.
Also, no crying family members were shown during their coverage of COVID in Britain. It was all about stoicism, resilience, etc. But scenes of grieving family members were, I don't recall seeing them. And this in particular scene is even worse. They're actually showing a dead person. If it's true that at that moment that person died and the doctor was telling them that quote, she is no more, they're basically showing a dead person on TV, which again they did not show in Britain or Italy or any other Western country.
Her family, among hundreds in India, denied even the chance of saving a loved one. COVID-19 has hit this country with a ferocity not seen before, but not unexpected either.
Balaji! Kahe aise kaile hate? Hey!
This woman tries to revive her brother who was losing consciousness. Balaji Tirupati, the father of 2 children, died minutes later.
That is probably the worst.
There's an acute shortage of oxygen too. Seema Devi died because the ambulance ran out of it. Some hospitals have just a few hours of supply left. And this
So that scene of the woman trying to resuscitate her brother, again, why was this even like the degree of morbidity that is being shown here is just crazy, just absolutely crazy. Um, they would now. Here's the thing. It is true that, for example, the state of chaos outside of hospitals in a country like India, which doesn't have as developed a healthcare system as Britain or Italy or any other European country, yes, you're going to have scenes of chaos that you won't in these other countries, because it is much more ordered, the way that patients are coming in. You didn't have like the scramble for beds that you're seeing here, and that, for example, you would we briefly saw here in Mexico as well, or the lack of oxygen. You know, UK hospitals didn't run out of oxygen, thankfully. So there is a degree of, like I said, chaos and disorder that you will not see in Western coverage, which is somewhat unavoidable if you're gonna cover the pandemic in a country like India. But even so, if the BBC's reporters really wanted to go out in Britain, you know, when London was being slammed, and find instances of grieving families, or just some other display of human suffering, they could have done that. I mean, let's be honest, they would have found people somehow. But of course, this was not the case. And as we'll see in the videos later, everything is so sanitized, so detached from suffering, from the human element. Whereas this video from India just wants you to see the pain of people. They want you to see human suffering. This is morbid voyeurism, basically. And like I said, if this was the standard that the BBC applied to all its coverage, I would not be making this video. I would just say, well, you know, they are trying to show the grim reality of the pandemic, the human face of the pandemic everywhere you go. But no, the BBC censors itself. Like many other major media outlets, they censor themselves voluntarily, because what they want to present to their British audience is a completely different story than what they want to get from their coverage from India. So let's finish this
It is
video.
Delhi, which has among the best healthcare facilities in the country. It's what's been feared would happen since the pandemic began. But once the first wave subsided, the government almost declared victory over COVID-19. The country's been caught unprepared.
Another notable thing here is, well, the criticism, which I think is very justified, of the Indian government's, I must mention, the right-wing populist government of India. Their reaction to the pandemic has been appalling, like absolutely appalling, especially in the last couple of months, where they've allowed political rallies to take place, they've allowed religious festivities to take place. They have not taken the, like many far-right populist and some left-wing populists as well, have not taken the pandemic seriously. But was there such scrutiny of Boris Johnson's failures in Britain by the BBC back then? Not really. You didn't have these sort of BBC reporting of major hospitals, and then inserted the context of the bad government response from, I should add, another right-wing populist government, which is the Boris Johnson administration. So we didn't see that at all. I don't know what's left to say about this.
And now it's stunned by fear and grief. At this crematorium, new funeral platforms have had to be built overnight because of numbers they've never had to handle before. Alone and in a protective suit, Rohit Sharma builds a pyre for his mother Deepika, a ritual normally performed together by families.
We were not prepared. As a country, we were not prepared. And it's really sad to see my mother go away because she was just 59. And she recently retired and wanted to spend some quality time with us. But all I could see is lying down on the... That's all I...
Holding
And I think we've seen enough. So now let's compare this video with one of the BBC's videos of the UK. This was late December when Britain was being hammered by the second wave. Let's see a similar clip and compare the style, the lack of voyeurism, the emphasis on how the NHS is coping, you know, how brave the doctors and nurses are. Note that there was none of this in the Indian video. Like no signs of the effort being made by medical staff and their bravery, facing a situation much worse than the NHS ever faced. Clearly because Indian hospitals will not have had the same resources as British hospitals, so the emphasis on the human factor was much greater. But there were no Indian heroes in this story. Nothing, just suffering.
Patients being treated for COVID in England's hospitals is now higher than it was at the previous peak in April this year. It's the latest evidence of the intense pressure on NHS services throughout the United Kingdom. More than 40,000 new infections were reported in the UK in the past 24 hours. That's a record as the new variant of coronavirus spreads rapidly. In the south of England, doctors are reporting that the level of patient need is incredibly high. Conditions in many Welsh hospitals are said to be very challenging, while doctors in Scotland say that there's a danger that health services will be overwhelmed.
Also note the use of words, you know, challenging. You know, this sounds like it's under control. Again, euphemisms for a situation that was very dire at that moment. And perhaps maybe not as dire as India's is right now, but still the language being used, the framing of the tragedy is completely different, right? It's under control. That's the message that you hear from the coverage in Britain.
Health editor Hugh Pym has the latest.
There was a stark message today from Homerton University Hospital in East London. Nurses and doctors are incredibly stretched caring for very sick patients. No one should underestimate the impact the infection can have. One hospital in southeast London has declared an internal incident because of the high number of COVID patients. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Greenwich said it was working with health partners and patients were getting the care they needed. Elsewhere in the capital, patient numbers continued to rise, with the variant of the virus found initially in the southeast of England spreading more rapidly. Accident and emergency departments reported intense pressure.
I was on Christmas Day and it was...
So, notice anything different? No videos of people even being taken out of the ambulance. Like, not even that. Just, you know, very sanitized pictures of ambulances here and there. Nothing that really captures the magnitude of the situation. I was in Britain during the first wave, and I was at the time living on a street that would take you to two major hospitals in East London. And during the peak of that wave, there was an ambulance sound every hour. And it was a time that I was staying up very late, doing a project. And I would stay up until 3, even 4 a.m. because we were in full lockdown. There was nothing to do, basically. And and I would still hear ambulance sounds at 3 a.m., at 4 a.m. Like, it was that bad. So and considering the second wave was even worse, I'm just absolutely stunned that the BBC could not find any video that just captured the dimension of the problem the way that they easily did in India.
Wall-to-wall COVID. So we see patients who are coming in who have COVID symptoms, but we also see other patients coming in with other problems who turn out to be COVID positive. And between that, there is a great deal of difficulty getting those patients through into the wards.
Unprecedented amount of work.
The medical director at one big hospital trust spelled out what they were facing.
Things have been really challenging over the last few days. I suppose the best illustration for that is on Christmas Eve, we had about 170 patients with COVID across our hospital sites. And today we have around 242. So a very large increase has occurred over the last few days.
The number of COVID patients in...
So also no interviews with any Indian, like, top hospital directors or managers to kind of give you a more professional view of the situation. So again, the videos of chaos, the videos of just everything looking disorganized, whereas professionalism for the NHS, everything's under control. No matter how bad the situation is, we will speak to, like, senior staff to give their professional views, whereas in India we'll just show the chaos outside the hospital doors.
Hospitals in England reached a peak in the first wave of nearly 19,000 in April. Then it fell away during the summer before picking up again from September, and it's now above the level of that previous peak. So what does that mean in practice? Hospitals need more beds for COVID patients, and in some cases are moving staff from other areas to care for them. Already some less urgent work is being cancelled. Health leaders say the postponement of more routine operations and procedures will become more widespread.
Sadly, it's inevitable that as the infections rise and the admissions rise, that actually we see disruption to other services. We're desperate, our members are desperate to keep that disruption as low as possible. But unfortunately, some of our elective and planned services will be disruptive, both in hospitals and in other settings as well.
Doctors in Scotland have warned that their health system is severely stretched and are
Also note that there's the videos that are carefully made so that they're not showing the face of the patients. And I'm not sure if this video shows the face of patients, but when they do, typically they are blurred out, unless they're actually interviewing a patient, where I presume that there has been previous consent. And I'm not even sure if they obtained consent from the people that they were interviewing in India. I mean, I guess it wasn't really hard to just put someone with a camera outside a hospital and just film what's going on around you with no respect to the dignity, no respect to, you know, preserving the privacy of the people there. So a completely different standard in how personal privacy is respected in their coverage of British hospitals versus those in Indian hospitals. I'll show another video. So you've got we don't need to see the whole thing, but here's another video of intensive care unit at the NHS. And again, January 15, this is the peak of the second wave in Britain.
This is what COVID sounds like. This is what COVID looks like.
See? There you go. Blur the faces. Respect their privacy. Something they didn't do in India.
This is what COVID does. Because COVID overwhelms the body, not just of the patient, but that of the system around them.
I was around in the first wave. I didn't think anything could be more challenging than that first wave, and I was absolutely wrong.
The volume is staggering. All of a sudden you've got a lot of patients who are sick with the same set of symptoms.
The fact is we've lost control of this virus this winter. We knew it was coming, but we've lost control. People are dying because we've lost control of the virus, yeah.
Have we been managing on the edge? Yes, I think we have.
There you go. Even despite one of them actually admits that they've lost control of the virus, the tone of the video is completely different to that of the scenes from India. Now, let's imagine for a second that the argument that you want to make is that, okay, the BBC is obviously a state-owned media, and it has in that role perhaps the duty to preserve calm in a situation of crisis. So the BBC's attempts at self-censorship play a vital public role in that by not excessively alarming the population, it could maintain greater social cohesion, etc. You can make that case. But the fact is, by that logic, then their coverage of, say, other Western countries should be as dramatic as India's, right? Well, wrong. Here's the BBC, their coverage of an Italian hospital in late March when Italy was getting hammered, when Italy was the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. This is their coverage, and surprise, surprise, it's a bit definitely more dramatic than their British coverage, but compared to India, still nowhere near as voyeuristic.
È un medico.
Come un medico?
Ragazzo al 2?
Sì.
Sì. È un medico che c'era in pronto soccorso, è stato ricoverato e ha il Covid. È stato intubato e anche lui ha fatto l'iter come tutti gli altri.
Oh, face is blurred again. Clearly, this was not a unique thing just for Britain. They're doing it for the Italians, but not for the Indians.
82.
È veramente una calamità. Si ammalano gravemente tantissime persone. Ed è un'insufficienza respiratoria da mettere a rischio la vita. Pazienti che finiscono in terapia intensiva si prevede una mortalità del 50%.
Sono parecchi anni che lavoro qui in terapia intensiva, sembra di vivere un qualcosa che vedi solo nei film. Adesso è un afflusso proprio soprannaturale.
C'è un impegno commovente. Tutto il personale, diciamo, sia medico che infermieristico, me li vedo arrivare anche quando non sono di servizio. Magari devono fare la notte, vengono anche al mattino a dare una mano. Io ho visto qualcuno piangere, ma lamentarsi non ho mai visto nessuno.
Perché lei non è preoccupata?
Un po' sì, Nell'emergenza cinese sono morti anche gli operatori sanitari.
So again, similarity with the British coverage is the fact that they are focused on interviewing hospital staff, giving a very professional account of what's going on. Clearly, these are professionals, they are calm, they are not exaggerating, versus the India coverage where they didn't speak with hospital staff at all. They just showed people, family members crying, people dying in ambulances. That's what they, people burying their loved ones. That's completely different focus of these videos. The Indian video was focused on the human suffering. The British and Italian videos are focused on how they're coping. And this is really my problem with why the India video is so racist, because it's normalizing suffering in non-Western societies. It's basically saying non-white people are just used to trauma. They're used to suffering. They can't handle emergencies. And it fetishizes this view of non-Western societies as being inseparable from human suffering. And by doing this, it makes it seem like they've accepted this suffering, like it's a part of life. Whereas in Western societies, suffering is not to be shown. This is not our normal life experience. Therefore, we don't show it. And what's the ultimate kind of, I wouldn't say objective, because I don't think they're even doing it consciously. Like, that's the problem. This is subconscious racism. But it's the idea that you're kind of less than human if you accept suffering in ways that other societies are made to believe that they find intolerable. So, once again, I'll repeat the main point that I'm making. If the BBC had the same standard of looking for, weeping family members, funerals in Britain, showing the agony and suffering of people during the pandemic, I would not be complaining. You want to show a human face of what's going on all around. And maybe it'll get people to take the pandemic seriously. It might work. I'm not against the idea of showing the human tragedy of COVID on film. But I am against a double standard where this suffering is normalized and fetishized when it's happening in non-Western societies. Whereas for your Western coverage, you show a very sanitized, a very professionalized view of what's going on and avoiding the human side to it. So I don't know if the BBC has gotten many complaints about this video. I've actually had comments from Indian friends or people who are related to people from India, and they've also expressed that they were quite shocked at just how voyeuristic these BBC videos have been, and they've noticed that the style of coverage is much different when they show. And it's not just been India, it's the same what they've shown recently in Brazil, for example. It's just common that in non-Western societies, you show the human tragedy part, you see the sorrow, the suffering. You don't really show the professionalism of the people in hospitals anywhere around the world, from Sao Paulo to Manaus to Mexico City to Delhi to Mumbai to Cairo. Every country that has suffered from COVID has had a tremendous amount of heroism on the part of their medical staff in trying to deal with this disease with much fewer resources than the heroes in the Western countries, the heroes that they show all the time, not because they don't deserve the praise and because they don't deserve the label of heroes, because they are. Anyone who is dealing with COVID right now, any hospital worker, hospital staff dealing with COVID at any point during the pandemic is a hero. But in these countries where they're doing more with less, it's an extra effort. And to not show that side at all and just concentrate on the human suffering is really disgusting. So, like I said, I don't know if the BBC has received any complaints, but that is my complaint, which as someone who was in Britain during the first wave of the pandemic, heard all those ambulances throughout the whole day and throughout the whole night, and imagined what was going on in a household that had to call an ambulance at 4 a.m. because a family member was gasping for breath or suffering in some other unimaginable ways. The human suffering of people throughout this pandemic has been universal. It is not limited to just the non-Western societies. And I think if you want to really do fair coverage, you either show it for all or show it for none. Anyway, thanks for watching, and do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. There's more to come. Thank you.